Hey, good morning and welcome to another Pi Crowdcast with our technical difficulties, which are seeming to become commonplace for us. Good to have you here. I'm Rick Tarosi. I'm the co-founder and general manager of Pi. This morning, we have Kate Ertmann with us. Hello, Kate. Welcome.
Hello, Rick. Thanks for having me.
Of course, it's great to have you here. I'm really looking forward to our chat. I can still remember back that one time we met in Stumptown on 3rd and spent like 2 hours talking. So we may go off the rails if you're not asking questions. So just be forewarned.
As we've discussed, this could loop one to another thing and another thing. So pardon us.
Be forewarned. Some kind of housekeeping logistics before we get started. If this is your first time on Crowdcast, there's chat available where you can talk with one another or try and signal me. If you're having technical difficulties or anything, feel free to type in there and I will try and help you take care of those. If you have questions, however, instead of typing them in chat, look at the bottom of your screen and there's an Ask a Question button down there. The beauty of that is that you can not only type in questions that you'd like Kate to answer, but you can also upvote questions that other people have submitted. So that way we can keep the conversation focused on topics that are most important to the people who are here. And if you have to leave early or pop out and pop back in, this whole thing's being recorded and will be available right at this link in the future. And then we also upload it to YouTube. So that's all the housekeeping. Let's get into it. Kate, would you please provide a little bit of your background and your bio for context?
Sure. Yeah. So, okay. So, hi, everyone. I'm Kate Ertmann. I work my current work is doing consulting with startups and with small businesses in a variety of different industries, either focusing on building an operational structure or kind of reorging an existing structure that might have been thrown into place when the company started and then now is not working because of a various amount of reasons. I got to doing that type of work because that is what I really found I liked to do when I was one of those accidental CEOs when I ran a 3D animation company for 15 years here in Portland.
Yep.
I'm not an animator. Still really don't know how that all happened, but I had an animation company for 15 years and then I sold it about 5 years ago. And now I'm doing the work that I liked doing when I was doing that, which is building those infrastructures, doing the operations, and then integrating that with the finance and having those two worlds speak to each other. The human being part of the work that the humans do, and then how that affects the bottom line and how it can, the long-term integration and steps between operations and finance.
And can we dive a little more into operations and how you define that? I think so often I see in startups, operations is just categorized as, this is everything I, the CEO, don't want to do, and so I'm trying to put it on somebody else's plate. Can you give us some context for what you mean when you say operations?
Sure. So what I mean is truly the infrastructure. So anything that is related to the employees, as far as how we're defining what people we need to be involved in the company, what humans that we're looking to affect with this company, and be it outside the company or internally. And the day-to-day structure that is going to allow that CEO, that founder, those other brainiacs that the founder is bringing on or partnering with to actually do the product or the service. So if you think of it like a building, which is how usually I go back to this stuff, it's just all the, not just the physical building. So people can make that product or service that they're good at, instead of trying to figure out how do you build a company. It's what houses it, and it's the plans that are made. It's the architecture, it's the blueprints that are made prior to that building being built. A lot of times I'm brought in or asked to come in when something's already going. And sometimes I have to be like, that was a decision. Why did you decide to build that room in that way, or that floor in that way? May I make a suggestion? That stairwell
doesn't go anywhere. Why did you do that?
Yeah, exactly. That's a hallway that just goes into a wall, and there's no doors into the rooms. You built the rooms, there's no doors going into the rooms. So I can help you with that. Yeah. But I stay away from, I think the reason why I'm able to work with a lot of different industries is because I really, I work hard to understand the industry that I'm going to work with, that this company might be in, but I myself, I'm just going to build the best structure for that service or product to live in.
What, I know you're super passionate about this work. What appeals to you? Like what drives you? Is it the challenges? Is it like figuring out the riddle? Like what appeals to you about this kind of work?
Definitely challenges, definitely riddle. I love math. Those that know me know I love math. I love theoretical math more than like just doing a spreadsheet, though I love me a spreadsheet. Spreadsheets are great. Spreadsheets keep the world going. But I love just seeing how things function and how the different ways that you can, the different paths to making something function. That to me is one of the more fascinating things is, and I equate it to math where I'll say, and I heard this long ago, this isn't something that I figured out, but basically if you say, what we want to get to is the number 24. Well, you can get to the number 24, and we all agree we want to get to 24, right? 24, great. We're all going for 24, whatever 24 might represent. But you can take 6 times 4 to get to 24, or you can take 2 times 12, or 8 times 3. You know, there's all these different paths to get to that. But let's all, you know, I love when everybody's like, I want to get to this thing, and then people start having the ideas. It's like, okay, let's figure out the path, and let's figure out the most efficient path, and who else we're going to affect by taking that path as opposed to that path. And yeah, it's problem solving. I love me. I love being challenged with something that someone can't solve. So I'm like, we can solve that.
That's awesome. I know you've also had the opportunity, I guess is the best way to put it, to wind down several companies, and I know that you know, unfortunately right now, given where we are with the pandemic and that I think a lot of people are going to be either forced into a similar situation or at least putting a business on ice for the time being. Like, what should people be thinking about as they're approaching kind of end of life for a business?
I would say if you don't have if you have, it's kind of hard to write something in crisis with a clear and open, you know, with that 2020 vision, however you want to phrase it. So if you feel like, number one, if you're not in crisis right now, yet, of course, none of us know exactly what's going to be happening. But if you're not in crisis right now and you are anywhere in the executive level of a business or you run a team or whatever, make sure to write down and then have somebody who's not directly affected by that plan to hold you accountable, like share it with them. Write down that plan of what you're going to do when you're in crisis. And owners should do that immediately. You should have your agreements in place of when someone's going to, like I had a partner in the animation company. And if we hadn't put a plan in place of when he wanted to leave, or either of us wanted to leave, we would have then gone into an emotional state when he said, I want to go. But we knew that when either of us said, because we had it written down years prior, we said, unless there's like a health emergency for that person, my co-founder can't leave until you have to give 6 weeks notice or 8 weeks notice or whatever it was. And, you know, so it's some emergency. So we had all these kind of parameters to follow. So for those that aren't in crisis right now yet, but you suspect it could happen, or even if you don't suspect it will happen, as we never know, surprises.
Right.
Have those things down and like have all the emotional things written down. So not just here's what I expect, like making a timeline for certain. So if we need to shut down in 2 weeks, what does that look like? And how much grace do we want to have to our employees? Are we going to say, first we'll try furlough, or are we going to say, hey, we're laying off everybody as soon as these 3 things, if they happen, I hope they don't happen, but if these 3 things happen, we're going to lay everybody off, because that means you'll get unemployment here, and we will have the goal set to have these things in place, or we will reopen the organization when we have these other 3 things in place. It's making those decisions now. And if you already are in the crisis mode, then doing the same thing, just knowing that's there's going to be emotion attached, I guess. And making, I am a fan of making a couple different scenarios, not just making the one, making the decision of when, certainly being clear of when you're going to choose which of those options. Do I close in 2 weeks? Do I close in 4 weeks? Do I close in 8 weeks? But again, looking at the different paths to where that closure is, because sometimes, like, I hadn't thought of that. I hadn't thought that if we stay around for 4 weeks, then that means we get to the next quarter. And then that means that the funding that we're getting, we might actually, if we can hold out until June 15th, then we're actually going to get this funding that was promised to us by June 1st. I don't know, instead of closing it down in May. So planning. I like planning. I like lists.
So just working through those scenarios. And
but doing race and going back to the humans is the biggest thing to me, really, with all of it. I mean, there's money and there's humans, and that's operations to me. It's those 2 things stair-stepping each other, and put the humans first, because in the long run of your life, humans should be first before the money, if at all possible.
Totally agree. That becomes a good kind of jumping off point for some of your volunteer efforts. Talk to us a little bit about your involvement with Rotary and what appeals to you about that.
Rotary. I freaking love Rotary. I'm going to guess not many people here know about Rotary, or if they've heard about it, it was like, their granddad like went to this weird meeting once a week, and he wore some weird hat and had some weird handshake. I don't know. But it's not the Elks Club. It's one of those things. What Rotary is a service organization, worldwide service organization that's been around for 115 years. It is 33,000 members worldwide. There are, it's 33,000 clubs worldwide, and 1.2 million members worldwide. It's insane. The Portland Club, out of those 33,000 clubs, the downtown Portland clubs, there's a few clubs in the area. Downtown Portland Club is number 15 in the world. Wow. We were the 15th charted Rotary Club. We celebrate actually this year, 2020 is our 110th year. And I get to be president of it this year. It's crazy. And it is a bunch of older men in the club for certain, because it came from the business world. So Rotary came from a bunch of businessmen wanting to do good in their communities, and they wanted to do service work. And it's Rotary because you rotated between the different businesses and different industries. But it started just because of what business looked. It reflected business. So it did look like, executives in business for decades were men. And as more women and people who were in other minority groups started actually being able to be a part of the decision making, some folks started going over to Rotary. And so I love it because it is the perfect example of the things that I like to poke at, which are industries, groups that not only are dominated by a group that I am not a part of, characteristically, but that also have money, like serious money to do good work with, that money that is there specifically to help others. So our Rotary Club, one of the 33,000 in the world, has over $4 million in our foundation. And we distribute about $250,000 to our community each year. And we raise all the funds from within. We don't do fundraisers. It is all from the members that money is raised every single year and built upon. The Rotary International, so kind of our mothership, $1 billion with a B in their foundation. They run that organization purely on the interest. It is beautiful. It is beautiful. So I am involved with it because I can see the path of where I can hopefully affect who the decision makers are, because again, it's been it's a very hierarchical path to getting into different leadership roles. There's like, there's the club, there's the district, there's a zone. It's like, it's wild. And I want to keep doing what I can do to affect who's deciding where that money goes. Because it's there to be given, and it is. And again, it's not like people are pocketing it. Like, it's doing really great work. But where else could it be doing work? That just whoever is on some of those different boards, those different levels are, where they're deciding what they're influenced by to decide where that money is distributed and what's important to distribute to. I like to keep and pushing others up also that may not look like the people that are already on the board.
If people want to get involved, what's the easiest way to do that?
Contact me, and I can introduce you down to the right path, the right person to find out what your interests are, because we have community involvement as well as international involvement, international service. We specifically do work with domestic violence, the different services and shelters. We have a whole homelessness committee that is doing work. And again, when we say doing work, the service work, sometimes it's monetarily and it's giving grants. And sometimes it's certainly, boots on the ground kind of volunteer. A lot of work with kids and mentoring and business mentoring, a lot of that, which is really, really quite amazing. But contact me, or of course you can contact, go online. I think it's Rotary PDX or PDX Rotary. I never remember. I think it's Rotary PDX is the website. Anyway, either go through the office or just contact me.
Cool. Awesome. Thank you. Well, thank you for that context. I think now we should probably get into questions. We've got quite a few rolling in. And again, if it's your first time on Crowdcast, there's just a button at the bottom of the screen. There's probably a highlighted number next to it, like a 5 or 6. If you click on that, you can submit the question you'd like to ask, or if you don't have any questions, you can pop in there and upvote questions you would like Kate to answer. So we'll get going. Starting with, how do you see operations infrastructure changing during and post-COVID pandemic?
Yeah. So during, again, hopefully there's some things in place already to refer to say, what do we do when catastrophe happens? Most of us don't, especially younger companies, smaller companies that just haven't had the bandwidth to devote that time to do that. I do, it's kind of more I have concerns of what could happen, which is that those that are executives in companies of what their priorities are. And understandably, a lot of times, and I'm thinking more certainly what I know about more private companies as opposed to the big public companies, but with private companies that they have, they don't have, may not have shareholders, but they certainly need to be focused on the bottom line. And my concern is that, already companies that I work with, at least initially when I work with them, they've been thinking about, DEI, about diversity and equity and inclusion. They'll think about it as, well, we need to have this. Younger generations are expecting it, which I'm like, yep. It's, it's a business imperative to have that as a priority in your business. But that's the word actually that I'm afraid that it won't be a priority anymore. That there will be folks who will say, well, we need to show that that we're going to have diversity training, but we don't have time or money to hire the people that are going to make it actually integrated, have that focus, have it be a focus of the company as opposed to just a focus of, the HR department, one training thing that is a little blip that people roll their eyes at. Well, some people roll their eyes at.
Yeah.
So I would say my concern is that budgets will get cut so much that that's going to fall off a lot of people's budgets to have intentional structure and metrics, and someone tracking the metrics of the, not just diversity, but the inclusiveness of how we're intentionally giving opportunities to others to rise up within the organization that may not have those obvious opportunities right now.
Yeah.
Kind of answered the question.
Yeah, you definitely did. I think, we're, to your point, the danger is a lot of the DEI work has been treated as kind of a nice to have rather than a priority. And I think in enforcing that it is a priority is something that every business should be doing. I think we also see that it's so weird to me that we also see some backsliding kind of in events right now. And I know you and I have talked about this before, but like that desire to have a diverse group of people speaking or presenting or those kind of that seems to be going by the wayside recently as well.
More work to do, which it's always been more work to do. And then people are like, oh, I don't have time. And I'm like, well, that means you're not making it a priority.
Right. Exactly.
Busy priority, right? People are like, I'm busy, which is fair. But what busy means is that you have a list of priorities, and right now people's priorities are just crazy because folks who are parents, I do not have children. I cannot imagine this time with kids, not just having the kids there, but like being their teacher. I mean, right. I don't have to tell this to all of you parents. You know how hard it must be. And then also working and trying. Right. So you're prioritizing. So if you're in charge of, hey, this event's going to go online, let's get the speakers together. You're like, I'm going to go to who I know, who I already have a relationship with, who I know is just a one call, a one email. And, this first one we'll just do without, we won't make extra work for ourselves. We'll be able to pull this together to get this thing done. And I encourage, it doesn't take that much more time. It takes more time, but to be more thoughtful and graceful and do the work to give that opportunity, or to find the opportunities to lift other folks up. Because when we talk about, how do you encourage your leadership or your bosses, your executives, your team members to make it a priority, is usually in business, taking it to the bottom line, saying, there's tons of studies done about the effect of, diversity in the workplace, that it's, to the bottom line in so many different places, as well as retainment, as well as, it all goes back to trust. And again, I could go deep dive, but there's many places that you can find how, when you're intentional in the workplace about this, and you intentionally set metrics, and then you're transparent about those metrics are, and you have other people hold you accountable to those metrics, people want to be around people who have that same morals and value system. So that's going to help not just with building the diversity of leadership in your organization, if you have that path defined, but it's also going to retain those of us that are good humans and want to work with people like that.
Yep. That's great. That's great advice. Next question. And we touched on this a little bit, but maybe we could go a little deeper on it. Tell us more about the relative importance of community societal engagement for all companies. And there's a parenthetical here that says, I know it can get relegated to the occasional donation when money allows. So kind of back to that nice to have.
Yeah. Yeah. That is so much. It does get into the nice to have. I think there is, I think there is more expectation, and it is more of a business imperative to prioritize, whatever might be quarterly, once your company's established after 2 years, let's say, and you've hit your certain financial markers that maybe your investors expect, whatever it might be, that you strategically have in your, in your 3-year financial outlook or 5-year financial outlook, you have perhaps a quarterly, percentage of profits are going to go to this organization or this space of service or whatever it might be to affect my community. Or when we hire people, it is expected that you do, we will give you whatever X number of hours per month to do service work. Like those things are ingrained from the top down in the value system. Because not just because it's a good thing to do, but there's an expectation, especially in the younger and younger generations going into the workplace, that I was thinking about this, a variation of this earlier, Rick, where I was thinking about way back when, and Rick will help me here, he'll remember this, when companies didn't have, when the internet started.
Yep.
And companies were like, you need a website for your company. And people would be like, I'm a brick and mortar store. I don't need a website, or I'll have just a landing page and it'll have my address. That's all I need to have. People can use the phone book. Internet.
Just be on GeoCities. It'll be good enough.
Exactly. And those of us, because at that time I was working in advertising and marketing and commercials, and we would stress how, one, internet's not going away, but it's that perception, right? You have people looking for jobs, you have people asking questions about your company. And if you aren't able to intelligently and transparently talk about, if you are asked, to talk intelligently and transparently about what is the plan to make this a more inclusive workplace in leadership, whatever it might be, or to have a truly structured give back plan in the finance, in the budgets.
Yep.
Folks, that can turn somebody to want to be there and work for your company, even if you can't pay them the amount of money, the salary that they're asking for. Like that can be truly a decisive factor, and especially in younger generations. And then when I talk about, when I made that reference and then I kind of threw it away about the website analogy, that if you're not transparent about it, not just transparent, if you're not, I think companies should be public about their metrics so the public can hold them accountable, whether they hit or don't hit their metrics. And if I'm going to get to it. Stopping. If someone is, like they may ask around, I guess that's where I'm going. If someone may ask around if they're looking for a job, or someone may ask around about your company, and if you're not known for having that as a priority of supporting your community and raising up others who may not have opportunities within your business or your industry, you won't even know that they're doing that. But the thing is, that is what people do on the internet when they're looking for a job. You're checking up on the company. This is me typing. You're checking up on the company and finding out what is their history, and are they known about, are they good about communication within the organization? There's so much that goes on. It is crazy to me how many leaders, or even sometimes in HR, in some more staid HR departments in companies, they will not even consider. They're like, well, if someone has a question, they'll come ask me. And I'm like, no, they can just find out on the internet. And granted, yes, there's people that post crappy shit about companies.
Sure.
But someone worth their while that you want to have on your staff is going to, realizes that, and they're going to ask around. And that's how you attract good talent and keep good talent, is the authenticity around your planning.
Yeah, I think that's such an important point, that in the world I live in the startup world, like so much is focused on the dynamics of what happens in the Bay Area, which is a very financially motivated community. That's not a judgment. It's a financially motivated community. It's started because of the gold rush, and it's just kept that same personality. Absolutely. But in other cities, small metropolitan areas to large cities, I tend to see people not being so financially motivated. It's the stories that the companies are telling, or the transparency that companies are revealing, that do truly attract the talent that they need, more so than the paycheck. So I really appreciate you highlighting that.
And that's how you build trust. People, we talk about building trust, and folks are like, how do you do that? And I say, well, you have to show vulnerability, and the way to show vulnerability is to be like, I failed there and that didn't work. Here's what I learned from that. With trust, I will have, and you'll understand this, I've had so many meetings with so many different startup founders and leaders who, if they start feeling uncomfortable when I make a suggestion of, go and talk to your staff, or go and talk to your clients and say, I don't know about that, and I need to know more about that, and I'm asking you to give me some feedback. I'm not necessarily asking someone else to teach them. That's not cool. Go, do your own research. But if you can get feedback, and the number one pushback I get about that, of why a leader won't do that, or is too uncomfortable to do that, is they'll say that makes it look like they don't have control, or that they don't know what they're doing. And I'm like, no, I'm not saying that you're going to do what the majority of your employees want to have happen. That's ridiculous. No, you're the leader, and you're the head decision maker, and majority might say, we want to do A, and you're like, nope, we're going to do B. And if all the research I've done and the feedback I've gotten from you, here's why we're going to do B. And if they trust you, and if you've been establishing that, then they'll buy in, and they'll go with you on doing B, because you've explained. Because communication,
and because they feel heard too, right?
Like, which is so much the biggest hurdle.
It's super interesting how this just kind of segued into the next question. It's almost like we planned it or something. So for those conversations, for founders who might be uncomfortable being open like that, any tips on helping folks feel safe enough to be truthful and vulnerable during uncomfortable conversations, or tips on helping those who are historically difficult conversation avoidant to be open to having those honest chats?
So how I heard you say that was, for folks, there's folks who want to have a conversation with maybe someone who is hierarchically, they are like to their manager, or to the boss of the company, or an executive in the company. That's how
I think maybe to phrase it by way of analogy, it's, in my experience, so often founders are emotionally wrapped up in what they're doing or what they're building, and they have a hard time being objective about feedback or questions or that kind of thing. So any tips on how to kind of crack that so that you can have more open conversations?
So one way is always realizing that the person you're speaking with, especially if you are speaking to someone who's maybe above you in an organization, and it's a conversation you feel you need to have, and you feel relatively safe to at least approach that person, that they're not going to fly off. But always remembering that they are humans too. Granted, that they, like you said, they probably have some emotions behind, and maybe you yourself don't experience those same emotions. Maybe their emotions are, my kid, CEO person has their kids in private school, and if we make this really hard choice, their kids won't be able to go to private school anymore. And you're like, big deal, asshole. But understand that is the experience that they're having.
Yeah.
You aren't having that experience. You're having your own experience. That's always the first thing going into any of those potentially conflicting informations, is just acknowledging that is their experience, and that is what they're speaking from. And that's all we can ask of each other. The other suggestion I would have going into those conversations, especially again, like my assumption is like, I'm not even approaching right now. It's a much longer conversation talking about how do you have a conversation with someone that you don't trust. That's a whole other thing. But, but going into a conversation, you're more likely to be heard when you use the word I as opposed to you. So, which when I first was practicing that and learning about that, because of course there's a bunch of research done on it, and I've done that research because I love research. It's kind of counterintuitive to want to go into a conversation and say, I. But if you're saying, if you go into a conversation and say, you pissed me off the other day, or you know, your actions made this person threaten to quit, and we need to have that person in the company, or you know, something of that sort. If you go in, all they're going to do, if you say that, all that person will do when they're getting accused is get into defensive mode. I call it angry pony mode, because it is. They kind of like back up and want to bat at you, and they're not hearing you anymore. But if you go in, and if they have any sort of empathetic bone in their body, and you go and say, I need to talk with you. I'm scared. I'm nervous what the next 2 weeks are going to look like. And that grounds the conversation of what your intention is going in, as opposed to making that person, because anytime maybe says you to you, you're like analyzing, like, did I do that? I didn't mean to do that. That wasn't my intention. What the hell are they talking about? And you're not hearing anymore. But if you can go into conversations that are going to be difficult and just say, this is what I experienced. I feel this XYZ. You know, it doesn't have to get all like too feely, but saying, if you're pissed, go and say, I'm pissed, and here's why I'm pissed. And then ask a question to get the conversation, to make it so it's not a monologue from one person and a monologue from another person.
Yep. That's really good advice. Thank you. I think that's going to be super valuable as we work through whatever this next phase of business is.
Yeah. I mean, and it's going to be, all the leaders know, again, all the leaders that are out there in Rotary, we have a ton of, folks that are in Rotary are usually executive level or owners or C-level at least. And because they have the time and usually some dollars to be able to contribute and work towards service. And oh my goodness, what we have seen of, lots of CEOs of large health institutions and huge nonprofits that are all, they have such empathetic bones in their body, and they are having to make these hard decisions, but they also know, as good leaders, that they just need to maybe not absorb, but they need to hear their employees and their employees' concerns before they say their concerns. They need to understand where everybody's coming from to be able to properly be heard of be properly heard to communicate their planning for furloughing or closing down business, whatever it might be.
Yeah. There was a great post recently from a CEO who had to go through that and was super transparent about the process. And it reminded me of, to your point, when you come from the position of being empathetic and putting humans first, it doesn't make the situation any less painful, but it tends to make it somehow more tolerable or survivable. And so your point about just remembering the human, I think has always been critical, but it's going to be especially critical as we move forward beyond this situation.
Yeah. And they're going to be thinking that they'll know that there's a cost to, when you aren't leading with empathy each and every day, and you start having employees leave an organization, then it does affect the bottom line. Then you because you weren't empathetic, you are going to fuck up your bottom line, because employee turnover costs so much. And then looking for, doing job searches, costs so much, and hiring a new employee costs so much. So if you can do whatever you can to keep those good employees, a lot of times a little empathy can really go a long way, and it might make you uncomfortable, but say that then, I think that's one of the big ones for me is, again, working with a lot of leaders who maybe come more from the tech side and are just don't have that. It's not that they don't have empathy, but they may not just have the, be able to click into and register into that emotional part of their employees, or sense it or read it. They can't read the room, Right. And knowing that is so important to maintaining that staff is down the line will save you not just headache, but heartache.
Yep. Agreed. Yeah. I think, I always kind of refer to it as the entrepreneur's veneer. Like they're always in the position of being like, everything's great, stuff's going well, the product's killing it. And sometimes, while that may be what you need to reflect to the outside world, that creeps into the inside business as well. And that's right. That's corrosive. So being able to let that veneer down and be vulnerable with the company makes for a stronger company, I think.
And again, you can say, I don't know, I've never been in this before, and I don't know what we're going to do, and I don't know what this company's going to look like in 2 months, in 3 months, but I want to find out. So I am open to suggestions. Give me suggestions. You just, you can get 10 shitty ones, and then you get this like one little thing. You're like, that's interesting. I hadn't thought about it that way. And a lot of times, you know what? Those good suggestions are going to come from someone who doesn't have the same experience as you, who in life doesn't look like you, is maybe a part of a different generation. It's amazing how we, in our developmental years of development, how certain, that's when we all establish our ways of problem solving. It all happens when we're kids. So when shit happens at work, you're going to problem solve that the same way you did when you were 6 and no one would play with you, in the school ground. Not that I'm reflecting anything personal, but, but there's going to be, that's your safe way of doing things. We all go back into that. It's just natural. Again, that's just human to go back into those patterns that have worked before. And you don't even, in your head, you're not saying, okay, I need to do step 1 and then step 2. You're just like, reaction, I'm going to do those things. This is how I solve problems and learn to work to solve problems my whole life. So I'm going to keep doing that.
Yep. Okay, changing gears a little bit. If you were planning to start a new business, be it product or services based, this year, how do you think the timing, launch strategy, sales strategy should change in this new environment we find ourselves in?
Okay, excellent. That's a really great question. Would you mind reading it again?
Sure. If you're planning to start a new business this year, how do you think the timing, launch strategy, and sales strategy should change from a typical new business rollout? So what we did in the old normal, like how should we be shifting to today?
Well, if we're all in agreement here that the old normal was build something quickly or get the go for the money right away. I mean, I guess it kind of goes over what are we saying the old normal was? So if it was move fast, then I would say it is not try to be everything all at once. It is. I mean, it's always been this way, but I feel like, especially in startup world, especially in tech related companies, or we're all tech related companies, but I mean, like someone that the service or the product is based in is dependent upon a specific technical thing. It's being really, 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 really hyper focused of what problem you're going to solve, as opposed to saying we do this, and then I know we might have one of our potential competitors or or someone on, ancillary competitor, we're going to also be developing this, and we're going to be developing this, but we have this lead product or this lead service, and it is, I think it's just going to be respected if you just slow the fuck down and say, I mean, really, it goes back to zebra movement, right? It goes back to saying, let's think these things out and let's lead with empathy. And let's say, here's the one thing. And look, our hockey stick is, it's not going to shoot straight up, but we're going to be so, we're going to have very clear on goals and metrics, and we are going to make real money, and we're going to need real money to support us as we, as we keep needing to expand or, lead this market, whatever it is that it's going to be. But yeah, I would say that it is that investors and customers too are going to look for you to be able to solve or support one problem with that new product or service. And that's going to be, you'll gain more trust when it's so focused that way, as opposed to, be aware of where you can expand and be able to voice that, but don't feel you got to be getting money from all these different industries because you might be doing this and you're probably going to do this and you plan to do this in 2 years. Like, just slow it down.
Yep. I think that's great advice. And I don't want to contextualize the old normal as necessarily a good, like, it was a broken system, and the way it was broken is coming into sharp relief right now. But it was a system that at least people understood the way the system worked in its broken fashion. And I think we have the opportunity to rebuild a system more effectively now. So
and focusing on, if one thing we're certainly seeing right now is we have federal versus state, and the differences, and not just differences, but the outcomes from making different decisions locally, regionally, in communities, where you can really build that safe, trusting new system, new infrastructure by focusing on what is local, as opposed to running to get money from the Bay Area, where whether they say it or not, a lot of folks who are investors that are in the Bay Area or New York, or just someplace that is very different than our ecosystem. They know our ecosystem's different, but their brain's just going to automatically, unconscious bias is going to go back to what they know. And so they may say with their mouths that, oh, we know it's different here, so we're looking to invest in different things. They may not say that different, they may not understand or have the bandwidth to understand that this different is good. So do what you can to support and make it about the community and the region here, not worldwide.
We talked a little bit about from the employer side. This question comes from more the employee side. What advice do you have for the newly laid off in the new economy we find ourselves in? What should they be doing?
What should you be doing? Take care of yourself. Okay, so how do we look at this as an opportunity? Which can, people have been saying that so much on some calls now that I've been on some meetings. They're like, all right, what opportunities did you find this week? And I'm like, yes, and but
and this is awful. Yes.
This is horrible. And this is not going to be over anytime soon. And maybe there's another phase and then tears. But I will say, it's not necessarily an opportunity of being laid off, but this time, one of the best things that I looked back on after I sold my company and I was trying to figure out what type of work I wanted to do, you'll hear people say, when you're looking for a job, oh, what do you like to do? And what are you good at? And the best thing that I realized, and again, I made a list because lists are the best thing, is I got clear on what I was good at and that I did not like to do. So I'm good at sales. I'm good at business development, and I freaking hate it so much because I get huge social anxiety, and it drains me. So I'm good at those things, and I learned, oh, I can teach others how to be good at business development or mentor them in how to do cold calls or all that kind of stuff. That gives me more joy. So that's how I learned to kind of recalibrate how I was looking at, okay, what are my opportunities now? It's definitely know what you're good at. Definitely know what you aren't good at, but also know the things you're good at that you just hate doing.
Yep. I think that's really an important point there. I find this a lot in, this is a stupid analogy, but in social media for startups, like they're like, oh, I have to have accounts on Instagram and TikTok and Twitter and everything, and they hate doing most of the stuff.
Yeah.
So I'm always like, just focus on the social that you enjoy doing, even if your target market isn't there. You'll find the right people.
You will. You just never ever know who someone else knows. I'm almost 50 years old, and I am amazed at how many times I forget that, how did I know that person that I know on Twitter can be an idiot but just makes me laugh, and we have these stupid Twitter conversations back and forth, and then I mention something about, oh, I'm interested. You don't happen to know someone and blah, blah, blah. And they're like, oh yeah, my best friend from college is the CEO of this. I'm like, oh, interesting. It's go where you're comfortable. Otherwise it'll show, or or don't overextend yourself right now. It's not going to be good in the long run.
Yep. So we are getting close to the top of the hour. There are a couple questions left here that I think you would appreciate answering, Kate. So I'll make sure and just send them to you so we can get responses to those. But I wanted to save a few minutes. What we like to do here at the end is ask you what we as a community could be doing to help you. How can we be helpful?
In the immediate, wear a goddamn mask when you go outside.
Yes. It's not hard.
It's not hard. You might be feeling fine. You might be just taking a 3-block walk. We just don't know. I mean, my husband laughs at me because he's like driving to go drop something off in front of his brother's door and then getting right back in the car and driving back. And I'm like, do you have your mask with you? And he's like, I'm barely getting out of the car. And I'm like, and not just that he might bump into somebody, but there might be something happening, or he might remember that he needs to go pick up something, whatever it might be. Just always have that freaking mask on you, because for reasons we haven't gotten into a broad amount of testing yet, and we don't know when we will. So, so we just don't know enough. So please wear a mask, everybody, please.
Yep.
And then longer term, I would ask for folks to get uncomfortable, to go with that uncomfortableness in some conversations, or whether you're sitting on a bus, maybe not sitting on a bus, but maybe you're sitting with on a Zoom call with friends doing a happy hour, or perhaps you are having a meeting and it is work related and it's a safe environment. Speak up if you hear something being said that is not okay. I have been actually kind of amazed, like truly amazed, by the amount of people who circle back to me afterwards. And I understand why. People generally, I don't like to be uncomfortable. A lot of people don't like to be uncomfortable. I don't go towards uncomfortable, but I always know that it's better on the other side. If you just like, we need to talk about this. And so I've had so many times in the past, especially in the past few years when I've been really vocal about it, of folks saying to me after a call, all the texts I get, emails, like, I totally agreed with you in that meeting. And I'm like, why didn't you back me up or say, you don't have to don't even bring your own words. Just say, I feel the same as Kate. So speak up, because that not only makes a difference to that person, because otherwise you start feeling like you're crazy. You're like, no one else is speaking up about this. What's happening? And it's great when you reach out to someone afterwards to say that you didn't have the chutzpah in that moment to move forward and support them. But please speak up, especially if you are a member. Like if it's, I mean, I don't mean to be picky on white guys. I don't. But my brain right now, I'm thinking of being a woman in the room and a bunch of guys in the room, and the guy says something really freaking stupid and sexist. And it's like, it's just a joke. And me speaking up and saying something, if you are another white guy, you can be like, I didn't think that was a funny joke. I thought it was actually kind of rude. That goes a long way, not just for that person who spoke up, but also for the person who made that stupid joke. And they're kind of like, you know, because they'll sometimes brush it off when it's someone who looks like me, but they may not brush it off, more or less likely to brush it off when it's someone who looks like them. Speak up.
Love that. Thank you. Thank you, as always, Kate. It was great to have you here. We really appreciate you spending the time. Even though it was a morning, we didn't get to do the Nats because it's morning time. But if you're joining us for this afternoon at 4:30, we'll have Leah Spencer on from Portland Business Journal, and you can have an outsider then when you join us. And if you're around tomorrow, we talked a little bit about employee relations and onboarding and that kind of thing. Kristen Gallagher will be here tomorrow to talk all about that. She's amazing.
She thinks about onboarding. See, talk about looking at a different path. She thinks about onboarding like no one else. It is so good. I love hearing her talk about that.
She's amazing. So I'm really looking forward to that conversation. We really appreciate everybody joining us today and spending time with Kate. Thanks for the questions. And as I said, if we didn't get to your questions, I'll make sure Kate has them so she can respond to them. As always, we really appreciate everyone showing up. Thanks again, Kate, and we'll see you all later. Bye-bye.
Bye.